It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the Pittsburg State assistant volleyball coach, Coach Miranda Rodriguez. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to become a college volleyball coach?
I think looking back when I actually was playing volleyball, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I was in high school getting recruited. And I think going to tournaments, for some reason, it just clicked. I thought to myself, watching all these college coaches being on our courts and everything, I thought, I kind of want to do that. I want to stay in volleyball. And I think it's just because it's always been my life and I can't picture my life without volleyball in it. So I think that's when I knew. It was probably my junior year of high school, but then things change. And then I still to this day am a college volleyball coach.
What was it like going to Quincy University to compete in collegiate volleyball?
Going to Quincy University was kind of a unique situation because I didn't know Quincy University existed just because it was a small Division II school. And I had an amazing experience there. I got to be coached under Bob Crank, and without him, I wouldn't be the coach I am today, or at least the player I was. There was some rocky moments in my career, but I played all 4 years and I helped my team go to the GLVC conference tournament for the first time since I can't even remember the specific date. But it was a good milestone in my college career, or I guess our team career. And so I wish I can always go back because I met a lot of my best friends there. And it was just a great experience to be at Quincy.
What was that like, obviously, getting to put on that Quincy volleyball uniform?
I would say it was unbelievable because, kind of a little backstory, back in high school, I actually got cut from my high school volleyball team. And it was a shocking moment in my, I guess, young self-athletic career, because at the time I was playing 3 sports, and my high school coach at the time, when tryouts came, didn't make the team. Of course, I go up to her and ask, what did I do wrong? And she says, blah, 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 blah. I think you should just pick another sport. And here's me thinking, oh my gosh, my dream of playing college volleyball is over. But then obviously looking now to the future, I guess it was so surreal to think that I was able to put on a college volleyball jersey just because I had someone tell me I couldn't do it. And it lit a fire under me that I said I can do it. So when it came my first day of freshman year, or even putting on that jersey, it was kind of just proving to everyone that no matter what, you can do it, even when someone tells you no. So I think my situation, or my experience and feelings about it, were a lot different than a lot of people's.
Of course, what were some of your collegiate accomplishments at Quincy?
So we didn't have many accomplishments just because Quincy, we were in a rebuilding couple of years just because our head coach was new to the program. And so we were his first recruiting class, or my class was. And during my time there, we had a lot of upsets where we would beat nationally ranked teams like Rockhurst University my freshman year, which was probably one of the best games we've ever played. And for me, I didn't know much about the competition or who was ranked above us because I just wanted to play. And some accomplishments that stand out during my career at Quincy was that we made an appearance to the conference tournament in 2017. That was my junior year. And then any personal accomplishments, for me, it was I reached 5th in the all-time assist list, and I reached a milestone of 2,000 assists. So that's pretty big for a setter. That was my position. So I would say we didn't have many accomplishments, but we did upset a lot of teams. And I think the best overall experience was that I left the program better than what I found it.
Coming out of college, what was it like getting into coaching and coaching first on the club level before going to the high school level?
You said club level? Mm-hmm. So the club level, it's a little bit different because you get to choose your team. And then I would just say you get a smaller number of girls. So you're very selective, where when you get to the college level, you have more numbers. So it was a little bit of, it gave me a little taste of what coaching was like. And you have to figure out practices and travel. And given your coaching, or I was coaching high school age girls, it was a little bit different just because at the time I was a senior in college. So the age gap was very small. And it kind of took a little bit of time to separate me as a player to now me as a coach.
Of course, what was that experience like getting to coach at Quincy Junior High School?
So I will say that was an experience, because I think I learned right then and there that not struggle, but coaching younger kids is just not my forte. But it's just because it's a slower game. You need to teach the basics, and I can teach the basics, but it's hard being at a junior high, because the junior high I coached at, they said you have to take all the kids, and we had 30 plus kids on one court. And so it was a little overwhelming, and you're trying to think about certain drills that we have one net and however many volleyballs, and we have to figure out how can we get everyone the same amount of touches. So that was a little bit of an eye opener, and you're just teaching them how to love volleyball, how to pass, or even just how to get your serve over the net. So that was a truly learning experience for me.
What were some of the things that you accomplished going to become a grad assistant on the college level at Washburn?
Some accomplishments when I was a grad assistant at Washburn, it was probably, I couldn't list all of them, but it's a huge list, because Washburn, when I went into it, very successful Division II program. Chris Herron, a very well-known Division II coach, one of my mentors. It was crazy. My first year in 2018, we went on a roll of 22-0 record. We made it to the MIAA championship game, ended up losing in the championship match. We ended up getting a seat or a spot in the NCAA Central region, ended up winning it all. And I'm sitting here looking back, being a Division II athlete, thinking, I didn't think any of this was possible, because my team at Quincy we didn't get to those points. And Washburn, this was just known for them. And going to the Final Four was amazing. And again, I could count off the endless accomplishments from players, the coaches. And I think I was just lucky and grateful enough to be a part of that, to see what it takes to make or to create this national ranked program. And it was awesome. And I am so glad I got to experience that my first year as a grad assistant.
What was that experience like, getting to go to the semifinals for Washburn?
So it was a festival year. And like I had mentioned, I had never been a part of something like that. And we got to go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was a little cold when we went there. But just to be there, we felt like celebrities, because we're pulling up in charter buses, we get police escorts, and it was just crazy. And I remember calling my parents, saying like all the things we got to do. And the arena we played in was amazing. And we got to play not all top 8 teams, but the Elite 8, because in the first round we played Wingate, and it was a 3-0 sweep. And I remember everything was working, everything was on fire. And I remember we had to start scouting for our next opponent, which was Tampa, who ended up winning the Division II national championship in 2018. And it was just a different ball game. It was good competition, and it was something that now, in the next year to come, we wanted to experience again. And just to see how the semifinals was ran, it felt like we were in a Division I atmosphere, like we saw on TV. That's how we felt. And again, it was so eye-opening. And I love that I got to experience that my first year as a GA.
What was that transition like, from going from being a GA at Washburn to becoming an assistant coach at Pittsburg State?
So it was a little bit of an adjustment, because actually when my grad assistant position ended, because it's only a 2-year position at Washburn, or in general, any GA positions, it was during COVID. So I knew it was time to look for jobs. And at the time I was applying for jobs, I was getting interviews, and then COVID hit. And that was just a disaster, if we all remember. And I remember there were hiring freezes. They weren't having people on campus. And so that was hard, because I thought to myself, there is no way I'm getting a job at this point, because no one's going to leave. And out of the blue, I get a phone call from my former boss saying, hey, Jen needs an assistant. And here I am just getting groceries. And I thought, who's Jen? And I still tell her to this day, didn't know who you were, because all my old boss was like talking super fast. He's just like, da, 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 da. Jen needs an assistant. And I thought, who is she? And then he went on and actually gave me more details. So making that transition from a GA to an assistant was a little hard just because, of course, during my time, it was COVID. So I actually got more time to learn and make sure this is how Jen Gomez wants things, or this is how Pittsburg State does things. So I had time to actually figure it out before we actually had a real season, which was in the spring of 21 instead of the fall of 20. So it was a little bit different than most, but I'm grateful that I had that time because everyone had plenty of time during COVID.
Of course, what was that feeling like becoming the assistant coach for Pittsburg State?
It was different because I think originally my first thought was it's going to be hard going from a conference school to another conference school because when we were going to play Washburn, I thought this is going to be very hard because I originally thought, let me get out of the conference and go somewhere else. But of course, things just happen and they kind of just fall in your lap, like how my position at Pittsburg State did. And it took me some time because as a GA, I was more in a learning position. I didn't say much because I was learning from the head coach and the assistant. Now being the actual assistant coach at Pitt State, it was, oh, wow, I am actually the assistant now. It's just me, the head coach. We did have a GA. So it was a step up and I had more responsibilities and more of a voice. And it just took some time to adjust, especially learning the players and how the culture is and maybe how Coach Gomez works and how I may have to balance her out, or this is my role versus maybe what the players needed from me. So I would say that's probably what I learned being a full-time assistant.
What was that feeling like getting to step onto that volleyball court for the first time as a full-time assistant coach?
It was eye-opening just because, as I had mentioned, I had more of a voice now. So I had to be confident and find my voice because when I would say something as a GA, they would not saying they would look at me with not respect me, but it was kind of like, oh, she just finished college. And I knew what they were thinking because I thought the same thing when I was at Quincy when we had a GA. And then as an assistant, I would tell them something. They're like, okay, make the change. I thought, oh, okay. So they're going to respond more. And it was good for me to learn. And then now I've gotten more comfortable and more confident in my role where you're doing this because of X, Y, and Z. And that truly helps just because of my head coach or my boss, because she has that confidence. And I think it just kind of rubbed off on me in a different way. So I knew if she can do it this way, and she used to be an assistant, she's like, you have full reins. Like, you're my assistant. This is what I expect you to do. Go for it. I'm like, okay, I got you.
Of course, during your first few years as the assistant coach, what are some of the things that you've accomplished so far at Pittsburg State?
So when I started in 2020, some accomplishments. I can't think right now off the top of my head. Right now, the goal for us every year is to be ending in the MIAA conference, top 5 in the conference. And every year when we tell the team, like, what are your team goals? Because they're the ones who set the goals. And because if we do it as a coach, it's not a player-driven culture. And we believe that if the players don't make those goals, we just don't get as far if it's a coach-driven team versus a player-driven team. And over time, we've beaten some good teams. And this past year, if I think more recently, so the past couple of years, the Pittsburg State has made it to the MIAA tournament, which is at this point an expectation. We should always make it to the conference tournament. And this year, a great accomplishment that just stands out to me as a highlight. We went in as the 6th seed out of 8 teams. And in a bracket, you have to play the number 3 seed. So we had to play Central Missouri, and they were ranked number 3. And at this point, we had already played them twice in the conference season, regular season. And going into it, we just thought, okay, we just got to win the first round. This is what UCM does, and this is what we're good at. They're not going to change, or this is what they're going to think of us. And going into the MIAA tournament, here we are playing Central, and long story short, we swept them in 3. And I remember sitting there as a coach and I thought, oh my gosh, we just beat Central Missouri. And there were some specific dates because that had been the first time in Pitt State volleyball history we had beat Central Missouri since, and I could be wrong on the dates, but I believe it was since maybe 2009. And then it had been the first round win in a conference tournament since 2008 or maybe even earlier. And so that was probably the best highlight or accomplishment so far that we had. And we've had a lot of accomplishments player-wise that I'm not saying I'm going to take credit for because it was them performing, but I helped coach them. We've had all MIAA selections, and this was the first year we had a first team all MIAA selection. And I think it's getting we're just making that curve and we're going up in Pittsburg State back to the powerhouse they used to be.
Who are some of the teams that you face each week in your conference?
In our conference, we face teams that are within the states of Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Kearney. And those teams are Central Oklahoma, Central Missouri, Northwest Missouri, Missouri Southern. I feel like I'm missing someone on the Missouri side, but it may come to me. On the Kansas side, it's obviously us, Fort Hays, Newman, Washburn, and Emporia State. And then in Nebraska, we face Kearney, Nebraska. So that's our conference. Right now, we're a little odd numbered. Typically, hopefully, we get an even number just so we don't have as much delay in travel, or not delay, but like a little complications with travel, because usually we have travel partners. So that's our conference. And then it's one of the top Division II conferences, and it's insane competition. I will say that coming from the GLVC where I played to now in the MIAA, it's just a different ball game. And I love being in this conference and the competition and the players we get to see.
Of course, what is that home game atmosphere like when you play some of those teams like Central Oklahoma versus going to Washburn to play them away?
It's always different at each arena. Some have maybe a bigger student section than others. Some may have maybe different gym dimensions or a lower ceiling. So we always have to mentally and physically prepare for what type of an atmosphere we're going to be in. Like if we go to, let me think of one school, like if we go to Kearney, Nebraska, their student section is literally at the end line and they're going to be taunting you. And we have to tell any newcomer, we say, hey, when we go to Kearney, this is what we get. If we go to somewhere, maybe like, I'm trying to think, well, like sometimes if we go to Northwest, their ceiling, they have a little bit of a different type of ceiling. So if the ball is played high, just be prepared. It may ricochet everywhere. So we just always have to be prepared for going from our gym, which we in our mind is the best gym in the conference because that's what we're used to practicing in, versus now someone else's gym who to them it's their home court advantage, whether it's their student section, maybe how their facilities are set up. But I think that's just how we prepare when it's home versus away games.
What does that recruitment process look like for those prospective student athletes?
Since I've been here. So when I first got here, it was just a little bit of a change because before I got here, Coach Gomez and the former assistant were rebuilding the program. They were bringing in like 8 or 9 kids every class. And when I got here, when I would look at the numbers, it would be more of, okay, we only need 3 kids in this class, or we need 7 kids in this class. Like looking ahead right now, we're actually ahead than what we have been in the past for recruiting, which is great. Because last year when we signed or committed all of our 2023s or our signees, Gomez had made the comment, she says, this is probably the first time we've ever been done. And this was back in July. And to me, I'm thinking perfect, because it's not that we want to relax in recruiting, but we want to get ahead. We want to make sure we're ahead of others so that, okay, we're done with the 23 class. Let's focus on this class. Once we offer these kids, we got to start looking at our 25. So I'm kind of a planner, and I want to plan ahead of schedule. And in coaching, you want to go day by day, go with the flow sometimes. But for me with recruiting, you have to plan ahead and know that this is what we got to look for in years to come.
Of course, what do you look at in those future prospects when going out on the road recruiting?
So when we look at prospective athletes on the road, it's a lot actually goes into it. Yes, the physical and athletic capability go into it. And we may say in this position, if she's an outside hitter, she needs to maybe have these size requirements. She needs to be able to play 6 rotations. And I'm listing A, B, C, D, like there's probably a whole checklist for each coach, for each position, what we're looking for. But there are other factors that go into it when we look at kids, because if we bring a kid on campus, do they gel with the volleyball team? Do they have a good personality? Are they a good student in the classroom? And how we find that out before they come on a visit is their high school coach. We do talk to their club coaches too, but we actually make the extra effort to call their high school coaches because they're the ones that see them on a day-to-day basis, because we want the full honest truth. If I call a coach at a high school, and we'll just use Carl Junction, that's down the road. If I call the Carl Junction high school coach and say, hey, tell me about Susie. And then I say, give me the complete honest truth. Like what is her student, or what's her student performance like versus athletic performance? Where do you see her? Maybe what's her family like? Because if there's someone that maybe just wants to get all these accolades and maybe are a little more selfishly playing, if that makes sense, and more about an individual, we kind of we harp on it's we over me mindset. It's the team comes before you. So it's just a lot that goes into it. And we have to make sure that one, we're the right fit for them, but on the flip side, they're the right fit for us. So I think that's probably the most important part when we look at recruiting is yes, the athletic side of it, but also kind of the overall human being personality and sorts.
What does that official visit look like at Pittsburg State?
So a typical visit for us is we'll have them take a campus tour, admissions presentation with our awesome admissions team. They do a fantastic job. And even I've been on a tour or two and I sit there and go, wow, like obviously they're good at their job for a reason. And they wow us as coaches, but they also wow the recruit. We do take them to lunch at one of our favorite restaurants in town called Chatters. And it's a Pittsburgh owned restaurant that has everything and anything. So you want pizza, you will get pizza. You want sushi, I guess you can get sushi. So that's one of the things that we do for them. We take them on athletic facilities tour. Depending on their age, they are allowed to practice with the team if they want. And that's kind of how it's pretty, in my opinion, very simple, just because I've been doing it for so long here at Pitt. And it's kind of the same routine. So we go from campus to lunch. They tour our facilities. They chat with Coach Gomez. They practice with the team, and that's kind of their visit. And it just depends where they come from. If they're in Kansas City, that's about 2 hours away. So that's an easy drive down and back. If they're from Texas, they may stay the night. So it just depends on the kid we're bringing in.
What is that like, obviously, as an assistant coach, to see them put on that uniform for the first time as a freshman and the last time as a senior?
I feel like I'm getting older, and it's hard to see these freshmen. They come in as babies in our eyes. And then by the time they're seniors, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like those 4 years went by so fast. Like for me, the freshmen that came in with me, they're actually COVID juniors. So next year, technically, kind of, sort of, they could be seniors or they could take that extra year. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I remember when these two were freshmen and they had no clue what they were doing. And they can probably tell you to this day, we had no idea what we were doing. And we were kind of in it together. We were learning about Pitt State and everything. We were new to everything. And when I bring in new kids every year, and Gomez and I refer to them as our kids. And so when we bring in those classes, it's like, oh, these are our babies. And now they're going to be old kids and now they're leaving us. Like it was weird this past year having our seniors leave or graduate. And it's hard it was hard at first not seeing them in the gym. Like I saw one of our seniors just yesterday in the weight room, and I was so happy to see her that I gave her a hug, and she was happy to see me. And I thought, oh, I kind of miss you. And it's hard, but at one point it's kind of letting your kids grow up. And last year, our 4 seniors, they have to grow up. So it's hard, but at least we know they left the program as better human beings.
What is that like, obviously, as an assistant coach, to see them go on and achieve great things, whether it's professionally playing professional volleyball or professionally in the workforce?
It's kind of like those proud parent moments. And like we had one of our players already, when she was done playing in December, she already had a job in nursing. And I thought, oh, I'm like, you're already going to be an adult. And it's kind of one of those teary-eyed moments where it's like, oh man, you're going to be an adult. Like I've had players who, once they're done playing, they get engaged. We're invited to their wedding. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I remember when you were a freshman. And like all these stories kind of come back, and it's just like a replay of their career or their time here at Pitt with me and Coach Gomez. And it's just amazing because you see them grow up, and you only get them for 4 or 5 years. Sometimes we get transfers, it might be less, but they're just always there. And it's hard to think about them not being here anymore. So it's a little bit of an adjustment, but I am proud of every one of them when they go on and do great things, whether it's they're being parents, they're being a spouse, they are very successful in their career. And I think it is the most amazing thing to see.
Of course, what advice would you give those high school athletes that are looking to get into playing collegiately?
My best advice is that for those high school players who want to go on to the next level is that you have to be sure that you are dedicated, and that you have to know at the end of the day, you are committed 100%, you're all in, and you have to find the right fit no matter what. And my parents gave me this advice when I was looking to play at the next level. They said, now, we know you want to play volleyball, but take volleyball out of the equation. Can you go to that school? So you have to remember it has to be your right fit, taking your sport out of the equation and seeing yourself at that university. You have to know it's not going to be easy. You're going to go in your freshman year and think during 2-a-days, you're going to think, oh, I can do this. And then after day 3, you're going to think I am the worst volleyball player ever. You're not. Everyone goes through those struggles. I remember I went through those struggles. We have freshmen every year. They go through those struggles, and then it's just going to take time. And there's always a light at the end of the tunnel is what we've been saying recently. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it just takes time. It takes effort, and it takes determination.
What advice would you give those freshmen that are entering their first year of collegiate volleyball?
I would say it's going to take time, and whatever you have to set your goals from your freshman year. If you say, this is what I want to do as a freshman by the time I leave, or whatever your next year goals are, I think it helps writing those goals down, not just saying, I'm going to play. It's like, okay, for me as a coach or a former player, I'm thinking, okay, how are you going to play? You have to be specific with those goals, and just know that your freshman year is probably going to be a learning year. Not a lot of freshmen play right away. I had the opportunity and grateful that I got to play my freshman year because we were just in that transition period and our coach needed freshmen to play. We're here at Pitt. Sometimes we don't need freshmen to play right away because we have older players or upperclassmen who just have that experience. And freshmen going into it just need to know, I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn a ton. And if I want to play, I need to put in the work, and I need to make sure that I'm making that transition from what I'm learning in practice to putting it into a game and kind of putting it all together. It's not always going to happen all at once. It's just going to take that time.
What advice would you give those college players that are looking to go and coach after their collegiate career?
I will say you have to love what you do. And for me, if volleyball is your life, like kind of how mine is, I can't see my life without volleyball, then college coaching is the way to go. And you get to travel a lot of places, you get to coach a lot of kids, you get to work with a lot of different people, but you just have to know that there are a ton of benefits and there are a ton of maybe things we don't get to do. So for me, I love volleyball so much, but here for me, I'm 8 hours away from my family, and it's hard just because eventually, if you want to move up in this world, I would love to be a head coach somewhere that's closer to my family back home. And you just have to know that this is your life, this is your dedication. You got to put 100% into it, and just know that you have to love your job. And that's for anything, like love your job. And you have to see if you can do it, because after 3 years of me, I guess this will be turning into year 4, 4 years of being an assistant coach, I still love coaching volleyball. No matter what age level, even I club coach on the side. And you just have to know going into it that it's going to be an adjustment. You have to think on the fly. Not everything is scheduled, set in stone. You got to change on the fly. I learned that at a very young life. It's not always you're doing this at this time, this at that time. It can all change in one moment. And you just have to know that volleyball, it's a year-round thing.
What advice would you give those future assistant coaches looking to get started in coaching collegiately?
So assistant coaches that want to move up, and you just have to know and kind of see your role and know these are all my responsibilities as an assistant coach. At one point, are you fine being an assistant coach, or that's kind of where you are? Or do you want to move up in the world? You kind of have to do some soul searching to think, do I want to be a head coach one day, or do I enjoy my role as being an assistant coach? Like, everyone has their differences. And at one point, unfortunately, some people do change their minds and get out of coaching, which is really hard. And I have some college friends, or some former college friends, that are getting out of college coaching, which is hard just because of the time or the demand of schedule. I think you just have to remember that if it's what you love and what you want to do, that this is the sacrifice. There are sacrifices that you have to make.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media, along with the Pittsburg State volleyball program?
So you can find Pittsburg State on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I believe it's at Gorillas Volleyball. I believe that is our handle. I should know that. But anyway, you type in Pitt State Volleyball, you're going to see a split face with a gorilla. We're the only gorilla mascot in all NCAA, which I think is so cool. For me, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I think it's at Miranda Rod 14. I don't post much, but if you want to see where I travel, or I guess any coaching advice that I put on there, I usually just retweet and everything. But that's where you can find me. I'm not that interesting on social media. But if you want to follow me, you can.
Thank you again, Coach Miranda Rodriguez, for your interview, and best of luck in your future as the assistant volleyball coach at Pittsburg State.
Thank you, Brandon.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to
You've been
like, comment,
watching
and
Brandon
subscribe.
Sports
Thank you again,
Talk.
Coach Miranda
Please
Rodriguez, for
feel
your interview,
free
and best
to
of luck in your
like,
future.
share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.